Imagine for a moment a thinker so controversial, so polarizing, that his name alone stirs unease among scholars, laypeople, and spiritual leaders alike. A man who spoke of the death of God, challenged moral conventions, and dared to suggest that traditional values were chains that prevented human beings from achieving their true potential. This thinker is none other than Friedrich Nietzsche. But why is he so despised? Why does everyone seem to hate Nietzsche? In today's video, we are going to delve into this question. We will examine the ideas that made Nietzsche one of the most influential philosophers of all time, and simultaneously, one of the most misunderstood and reviled figures in intellectual history. By the end of this journey, not only will we unravel why Nietzsche has been the target of such intense criticism, but we will also see how his provocative ideas offer some of the most profound insights into human nature, society, and personal growth. And trust me, the most powerful and transformative revelation comes last, so stay with me until the end. Nietzsche's philosophy is one that invites deep reflection. At the heart of his work is the idea that we are living in a world that has become disconnected from meaning, truth, and purpose. He famously declared that God is dead, a phrase that has been widely misunderstood. What Nietzsche meant was not that God had literally died, but rather that the cultural and moral systems built around the idea of God were no longer effective. Humanity, he argued, was drifting through a kind of existential crisis, where traditional religious values could no longer provide the sense of purpose they once did. This, Nietzsche believed, created a vacuum that needed to be filled with new values, values that were created by individuals, not imposed by society or religious institutions. But this leads us to the first reason why many people hate Nietzsche. His declaration of the death of God was seen as a direct attack on religion, particularly Christianity, which has been the foundation of Western moral systems for centuries. Nietzsche did not merely critique the church or its practices, he questioned the very foundation of Christian morality. In works such as The Antichrist and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche argues that Christian values such as humility, meekness, and self-denial are symptoms of a slave morality, a system of ethics designed to keep people weak and submissive. For many, this was blasphemy. Religion, for countless people, is the very bedrock of their lives. To suggest that the values they hold dear are the product of weakness, or that they are meant to suppress human potential, strikes at the core of their identity. Nietzsche's philosophy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about the ways we live, and about the beliefs we hold. And naturally, many people react to this discomfort with anger and rejection. It's easier to dismiss Nietzsche as dangerous or offensive than to engage with the possibility that he might be right. Yet despite this, Nietzsche was not simply a critic of religion. His aim was to liberate humanity from what he saw as the chains of dogma and conformity. He believed in the possibility of creating new values, of living authentically according to one's own will and desires. This leads us to his concept of the Übermensch, the overman, or Superman, a figure who transcends the limitations of conventional morality and creates his own path in life. The Übermensch is someone who rises above societal expectations, who embraces the chaos of existence, and who shapes meaning in a world that offers none. But herein lies another reason why Nietzsche is so hated. His idea of the Übermensch is often seen as elitist, even fascist by some critics. They argue that Nietzsche's celebration of individual strength and power can lead to dangerous ideologies that prioritize the strong over the weak. This misinterpretation has haunted Nietzsche's legacy, particularly in the aftermath of the Nazi regime, which co-opted parts of his philosophy, wrongly it must be said, to justify their ideology of racial superiority. Nietzsche himself, however, was vehemently opposed to nationalism and anti-Semitism. He wrote with disdain about German nationalism, and his relationship with his sister, who later edited his works, was fraught because of her anti-Semitic views. But, as is often the case with powerful ideas, Nietzsche's philosophy was twisted and manipulated to serve agendas that had little to do with his actual teachings. And because of this historical misuse of his work, many people today still associate Nietzsche with dangerous ideologies, fueling the hatred and misunderstanding surrounding him. So Nietzsche stands accused on two fronts. On one side, he is hated by those who see him as an enemy of religion and morality. On the other, by those who believe his ideas have fueled elitism and oppression. But here's the question we must ask ourselves. Are these accusations justified, or have we misunderstood Nietzsche's true message? As we continue to explore Nietzsche's philosophy, you'll begin to see that beneath the controversy, there is a deeply human message. Nietzsche challenges us not to tear each other down or dominate the weak, but to embrace the potential for greatness within ourselves. He asks us to take responsibility for our lives, to face the absurdity of existence with courage, and to find meaning not in prepackaged systems of belief, but in the creative act of living itself. In the next section, we will dive deeper into Nietzsche's ideas about morality, power, and the nature of human existence. We'll explore how these ideas can offer us valuable lessons on how to live authentically in a world that often feels disconnected from meaning. And most importantly, we'll uncover why Nietzsche's insights, though provocative, might just be the key to unlocking a life of purpose and fulfillment. Ready to continue on this journey of self-discovery and intellectual challenge? Then, let's move forward and see what Nietzsche truly has to offer. Let's continue our journey by exploring one of Nietzsche's most powerful and misunderstood concepts, the will to power. Now, this idea has been both praised and condemned by philosophers, psychologists, and political theorists alike. Some view it as an insightful look into human nature, while others criticize it as a dangerous celebration of dominance and control. But before we make any judgments, let's look at what Nietzsche actually meant by the will to power and why it's such a crucial part of his philosophy. The will to power, in its simplest form, is the fundamental driving force in human beings, the desire not just to survive but to thrive, to grow, to assert ourselves in the world. Nietzsche saw this as the essence of life itself. Every action, every desire, every ambition can be traced back to this fundamental drive. But it's important to clarify, the will to power is not necessarily about domination over others. It's about self-overcoming, the inner drive to surpass our own limitations, to become stronger, more capable versions of ourselves. Think about it. Every time you face a challenge, whether it's personal, professional, or even moral, you are confronted with a choice. Do you retreat, give in to fear, or stay within your comfort zone? Or do you push forward, overcome your inner resistance, and grow? Nietzsche would argue that the will to power is what compels you to take that second option. It's the force that pushes you to evolve, to rise above your circumstances, and to achieve something greater than what you were before. Yet many people recoil from this idea. Why? Because it places responsibility squarely on the individual. Nietzsche's philosophy demands that we stop blaming external factors, society, fate, even God, for our lot in life. He calls on us to embrace our freedom, but with that freedom comes the weight of responsibility. There's no one to save us, no higher power to guide our steps. It's up to us to create meaning, to shape our destiny, to strive for greatness. And for many, this level of responsibility is terrifying. It's much easier to believe that our lives are the result of forces beyond our control. This brings us to another reason why so many people hate Nietzsche, his radical individualism. Nietzsche challenges the notion that we should live our lives according to the expectations of others, whether those expectations come from society, religion, or tradition. He encourages us to break free from the herd mentality, the tendency to follow the crowd, to conform to the standards of others rather than carve our own path. In his view, most people live lives of quiet conformity, afraid to break the mold, afraid to assert their own will. But Nietzsche wasn't content to just criticize. He also provided a path forward, a vision of what life could be if we embraced our individuality and harnessed our will to power. He urged us to cultivate what he called amor fati, a love of fate. This means accepting the reality of our lives, with all its hardships and challenges, not with resignation, but with a deep, profound affirmation. Nietzsche believed that only by embracing the totality of our existence, both the good and the bad, could we truly live fully. Instead of wishing for things to be different, instead of clinging to illusions, Nietzsche invites us to say yes to life as it is, to embrace the chaos, the uncertainty, and even the suffering, because all of it is part of the journey toward becoming who we are meant to be. But here's the twist. Nietzsche also believed that most people will never reach this level of self-actualization. In fact, he believed that the majority of humanity is content to remain in what he called a state of ressentiment. This concept of ressentiment is crucial to understanding why Nietzsche is so controversial. Ressentiment refers to a kind of deep-seated resentment and frustration that arises when people feel powerless or inferior. Instead of acknowledging and confronting these feelings, they project them outward, blaming others for their unhappiness, or worse, they seek to bring others down to their level. Nietzsche argued that many of the moral values we hold dear, particularly those rooted in Christianity, are born out of ressentiment. He saw Christian morality as a slave morality, a system of values created by the weak to justify their weakness and to subdue the strong. For Nietzsche, concepts like humility, meekness, and self-sacrifice were not virtuous in themselves. They were coping mechanisms developed by those who could not assert their own power, their own will. This is why Nietzsche's critique of morality was so explosive. It was not just a rejection of specific ethical systems, it was a challenge to the very foundation of how we think about good and evil. Now you might be thinking, does Nietzsche want us all to become selfish, ruthless individuals, trampling over others in our quest for power? Not quite. Nietzsche's philosophy is not a call for brute domination or egocentrism. He wasn't advocating for a society where only the strong survive and the weak are cast aside. Rather, he was urging us to transcend the conventional notions of strength and weakness altogether. The Übermensch, or Overman, that Nietzsche envisioned is not a tyrant or a conqueror, but someone who creates his own values, someone who embraces life fully, without needing to rely on external validation or societal norms. The Übermensch is someone who has overcome resentment, who no longer blames the world for his suffering but instead takes ownership of his existence, creating meaning through his own will. But let's pause here for a moment. This idea, that we can create our own values, that we can transcend traditional moral systems, is deeply unsettling for many people. It challenges everything we've been taught about right and wrong, about duty and obligation. It asks us to confront the possibility that the world is not as neatly ordered as we'd like to believe, that meaning is not something handed down to us from above, but something we must forge for ourselves. And for many, this is a frightening prospect. Nietzsche's philosophy demands a kind of courage that not everyone is willing to summon. And so Nietzsche is hated because he forces us to face uncomfortable truths. He tears down the comforting illusions we cling to, whether they be religious, moral, or societal, and leaves us standing in front of the abyss of existence with no guide but our own will to power. But at the same time, Nietzsche offers us something liberating. He shows us that we are not helpless, that we are not mere cogs in a machine but creators, capable of shaping our own lives, our own destinies. In the next section, we will explore how Nietzsche's ideas have been misused and misunderstood over time, and why his philosophy continues to provoke such strong reactions. We'll also look at how his thoughts on the eternal recurrence, the idea that life repeats itself infinitely, offer a powerful perspective on how we can live our lives with purpose and meaning. Are you ready to continue? Let's dive deeper into Nietzsche's world. As we continue our exploration of Nietzsche's philosophy, we now arrive at one of his most enigmatic and thought-provoking ideas, the concept of eternal recurrence. This idea, while often overshadowed by Nietzsche's more controversial statements, is central to his philosophy and provides a key to understanding not only his views on existence, but also how we should live our lives. The eternal recurrence is the notion that everything we experience in life, every joy, every sorrow, every triumph, every failure, will happen again, over and over, in an infinite loop. Imagine for a moment that this life you are living, every decision you make, every action you take, will be repeated an infinite number of times, exactly the same way. Would you live differently? Would your choices carry more weight if you knew that you would have to live with them forever? Nietzsche presents this idea not as a metaphysical truth, but as a thought experiment, a challenge to confront life with the highest possible degree of affirmation. In his book, The Gay Science, Nietzsche writes of a demon who approaches you and tells you that your life, exactly as it is, will be repeated for eternity. How would you respond? Would you curse the demon and lament the prospect of reliving your life's pain and suffering endlessly? Or would you embrace it, affirming every moment, knowing that each experience, good and bad, is an integral part of the whole? This question is at the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy. For Nietzsche, to truly live well is to be able to embrace the eternal recurrence with joy. It is to live in such a way that you would not only accept your life as it is, but celebrate it, even if it meant reliving every hardship, every mistake, and every sorrow endlessly. The eternal recurrence forces us to ask, are we living lives that we would be willing to repeat for eternity? If not, what would we need to change to be able to say yes to this idea? This leads us to one of the most powerful and transformative aspects of Nietzsche's thought, the idea of amor fati, the love of fate. To Nietzsche, the eternal recurrence is not a burden to be feared, but an opportunity to cultivate a deep, life-affirming love for everything that happens in our lives. Amor fati means accepting our lives fully, not just the pleasant parts, but the struggles, the setbacks, the suffering. It means embracing everything as necessary, as part of the grand tapestry of existence, rather than wishing things were different. Here, Nietzsche departs from the pessimism of many of his philosophical predecessors. While thinkers like Schopenhauer viewed life as fundamentally tragic and full of suffering, Nietzsche saw an opportunity in that very suffering. He believed that it is through struggle and hardship that we grow, that we forge our character, and become who we are meant to be. Suffering, in Nietzsche's view, is not something to be avoided or resented. It is a necessary part of the human experience, and it is through facing and overcoming it that we become stronger. But this is precisely why Nietzsche's philosophy is so difficult for many to accept. Most people are conditioned to avoid suffering, to seek comfort and stability. Modern society, with its emphasis on convenience and ease, reinforces this tendency. We are told that happiness lies in the absence of struggle, in a life free from pain and difficulty. Nietzsche, however, offers a radically different perspective. He tells us that it is only through embracing the full spectrum of life's experiences, the highs and the lows, that we can truly live fully and authentically. Yet this idea, like many of Nietzsche's ideas, has been misunderstood and misused throughout history. One of the most notorious misinterpretations of Nietzsche's philosophy is its association with totalitarian ideologies, particularly Nazism. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, for example, was grotesquely distorted by the Nazi regime to justify their notions of racial superiority and dominance. But it's important to emphasize that Nietzsche himself had no such intentions. In fact, he was deeply opposed to nationalism, anti-Semitism, and any form of oppressive power structures. His work was co-opted and manipulated after his death, primarily by his sister, who held anti-Semitic views and sought to align Nietzsche's ideas with her own political agenda. Nietzsche's Übermensch was not a symbol of racial or political superiority, but rather an ideal of personal transcendence and self-overcoming. The Übermensch is someone who creates their own values, who rises above the limitations of conventional morality and societal expectations. It's about internal strength, not external dominance. Unfortunately, this nuance was lost in the historical misuse of Nietzsche's ideas, leading many to associate his philosophy with dangerous ideologies that Nietzsche himself would have vehemently opposed. This brings us to a critical point in our discussion. Why does everyone hate Nietzsche? Is it because of his radical ideas, or is it because his philosophy has been so deeply misunderstood and misrepresented? In many ways, Nietzsche's provocative language and challenging ideas make him an easy target for misinterpretation. He speaks of the death of God, the will to power, and the Übermensch in ways that can easily be twisted to support agendas far removed from his original intentions. But beyond the misunderstandings, there is another deeper reason why Nietzsche is so hated. He forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in. Nietzsche pulls no punches in his critique of modern society, religion, and morality. He tells us that much of what we hold dear, our values, our beliefs, our sense of purpose, is built on illusions. He challenges us to strip away the comforting narratives we cling to and face the world as it truly is, chaotic, indifferent, and without inherent meaning. For many, this is too much to bear. Nietzsche's philosophy demands a level of courage and intellectual honesty that few are willing to embrace. It asks us to take responsibility for our own lives, to stop blaming external forces for our circumstances, and to create meaning in a world that offers none. This is no easy task, and for many it is easier to reject Nietzsche's ideas outright than to engage with the existential challenges they present. But for those who are willing to take up Nietzsche's challenge, his philosophy offers a path to profound personal growth and liberation. Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch, his concept of the will to power, and his idea of eternal recurrence all point toward a way of living that is not bound by societal norms or religious dogma. It is a way of living that embraces the full complexity of human existence, the joy, the suffering, the chaos, and finds meaning not in external validation, but in the creative act of living itself. In the final part of this video, we will explore how Nietzsche's ideas can be applied to our lives today. We will look at practical ways to embrace Nietzsche's philosophy of self-overcoming and amor fati, and how we can use these ideas to live more authentic, purposeful lives in a world that often feels disconnected from meaning. Stay with me. The most important revelation is yet to come. Let's continue on this journey of self-discovery and intellectual challenge. Now that we've explored Nietzsche's core concepts, it's time to bring his ideas into our daily lives. After all, Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher who wanted to provoke intellectual debates. He wanted to inspire action, to motivate people to live more fully, more authentically. His philosophy, at its heart, is a call to transcend the mediocrity of life and to embrace the power we all have within us to shape our own destiny. So, how do we apply Nietzsche's philosophy to our own lives? How can we become more like the Übermensch, the self-actualized individual who creates their own values and affirms life in all its complexity? First, we must confront the reality of our existence, the idea that life at its core is neither inherently meaningful nor fair. Nietzsche famously declared, "God is dead." This statement wasn't simply an attack on religion. It was a recognition that for many, the old systems of meaning that once guided humanity, religion, tradition, established morality, no longer held the same power. We live in a world where the certainties of the past have crumbled, leaving many feeling lost, adrift in a universe without clear direction. For Nietzsche, this recognition is not something to mourn, but to celebrate. The death of God, in Nietzsche's view, frees us from the constraints of dogma and allows us to create our own values, our own meaning. But this freedom is not without its challenges. Without the safety net of tradition or divine guidance, we are left with the terrifying task of constructing meaning in a world that offers none. This is where the concept of self-overcoming comes into play. Nietzsche believed that the most powerful and meaningful way to live is to constantly push ourselves beyond our current limitations. It's not enough to simply follow the rules set by society or to live passively according to the expectations of others. We must actively engage in the process of becoming, of evolving, of striving to be better, stronger, more authentic versions of ourselves. The will to power in this sense is not about exerting control over others, but about mastering ourselves, overcoming our weaknesses, fears, and doubts. Take a moment to reflect. What are the limitations you've placed on yourself? Are there beliefs or habits that are holding you back from living fully? Nietzsche would challenge you to confront these limitations head-on, to embrace the discomfort of growth, and to continuously push yourself toward greater self-realization. This isn't an easy path, but Nietzsche believed that it is only through struggle and overcoming that we can become truly free, truly alive. But Nietzsche's philosophy is not just about individual empowerment. It's also about how we relate to the world around us. One of the most profound aspects of Nietzsche's thought is his idea of amor fati, the love of fate. To practice amor fati means to embrace everything that happens in life, not just the good, but also the painful and difficult moments. It means accepting reality as it is, rather than wishing it were different. Consider how often we resist the events of our lives, how we wish things had gone differently, how we replay scenarios in our minds, longing for a different outcome. Nietzsche saw this as a waste of energy, a distraction from the true task of living. Instead, he urged us to love our fate, to say yes to every experience, no matter how challenging or painful, because each moment, each event, shapes us and contributes to our growth. Amor fati is not about passive acceptance, it's about active affirmation. It's about taking responsibility for our lives, for our choices, and for the circumstances we find ourselves in. Rather than blaming others or external forces for our difficulties, Nietzsche invites us to see every experience as an opportunity for growth, for self-overcoming. This radical acceptance of life in its totality allows us to live with greater freedom and joy, unburdened by regret or resentment. But here's the challenge: loving your fate is no easy task. It requires immense courage and resilience. It requires us to confront the darkest parts of our existence and to find meaning even in suffering. Nietzsche never shied away from the harsh realities of life, but he also saw the potential for greatness in embracing those realities fully. He believed that through our struggles, through our suffering, we are given the opportunity to transform ourselves, to rise above our circumstances, and to create something beautiful out of chaos. This brings us back to the idea of eternal recurrence. Imagine living your life in such a way that you could embrace the idea of living it over and over for eternity, without wishing for anything to be different. Imagine having such a deep love for life, with all its messiness and unpredictability, that you could affirm it in its entirety. This is the ultimate challenge of Nietzsche's philosophy, to live in such a way that you would not only accept the eternal recurrence, but embrace it joyfully. Now, as we come to the end of our journey through Nietzsche's world, it's important to acknowledge that his philosophy is not for everyone. Nietzsche knew that most people would resist his ideas because they are difficult, demanding, and often uncomfortable. His philosophy requires us to take a hard look at ourselves, to question the values we've inherited, and to take responsibility for creating our own path in life. This is no small task, and it's understandable why many would prefer the comfort of established norms and beliefs. But for those who are willing to take up Nietzsche's challenge, his philosophy offers a path to profound personal liberation. Nietzsche shows us that we are not victims of fate, nor are we bound by the limitations imposed by society or tradition. We are creators, capable of shaping our own lives, our own destinies, through the choices we make and the values we embrace. So what does Nietzsche leave us with? A call to live courageously, to embrace life in all its complexity, to affirm our existence with passion and purpose. He reminds us that the only meaning in life is the meaning we create, and that true freedom comes from self-overcoming and the love of fate. As we conclude, I leave you with this final thought. What would your life look like if you embraced Nietzsche's philosophy? If you loved your fate, if you lived as though each moment would be repeated for eternity, would you make different choices? Would you live with more intention, more courage, more joy? Nietzsche believed that we all have the potential to rise above mediocrity, to become more than what society expects of us, to live fully and authentically. But it's up to us to take that step, to challenge ourselves and to become the creators of our own destiny. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Nietzsche's philosophy. I hope you found it as thought-provoking and inspiring as I have. Now, the question is, how will you live your life differently after this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, keep striving, keep questioning, and keep pushing yourself toward your highest potential. Thanks for looking. Imagine a person who seems to have everything: success, stability, a loving family, yet finds themselves unable to break free from a compulsive habit that slowly consumes them. Imagine another person who has endured a painful childhood, only to turn to substances, behaviors, or relationships that numb their inner wounds. What if addiction is not about the substance or the behavior itself, but about something far deeper? Today, we will explore a groundbreaking perspective on addiction, one that goes beyond mere willpower or genetics. We will uncover the profound insights of Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned expert in addiction, trauma, and human behavior. His work has transformed the way we understand addiction, shifting the focus from moral failure to emotional pain. And by the end of this journey, you will have a completely new understanding of addiction, one that might just change the way you see yourself and others forever. We will reveal surprising truths about why addiction takes hold, what truly fuels it, and most importantly, what it takes to break free. The final insight we share will be the most powerful of all, one that could redefine not just addiction, but the way we approach healing and self-discovery itself. To truly understand addiction, we must let go of outdated beliefs. For too long, addiction has been seen as a choice, a weakness, or a defect of character. Society often condemns those who struggle with it, labeling them as reckless, irresponsible, or even beyond help. But what if addiction is not a choice in the way we think it is? What if it is an unconscious attempt to solve a problem rooted in pain? Dr. Gabor Mate has spent decades working with people struggling with the most severe forms of addiction, from drug dependency to compulsive behaviors like gambling, overeating, and even workaholism. His research has led to a radical, yet deeply human conclusion. Addiction is not about the substance or the behavior itself, but about the pain that lies beneath it. Think about it. When do people reach for substances or engage in compulsive behaviors? It is not random. It happens in moments of stress, anxiety, loneliness, or emotional turmoil. Addiction is an attempt to soothe pain, to fill an internal void, to escape from an unbearable reality. As Mate says, the real question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. This changes everything. Instead of asking why someone cannot stop using drugs, why someone cannot break free from toxic relationships, or why they feel compelled to chase external validation, we should be asking, what pain are they trying to numb? What wound are they trying to heal? The origins of addiction often trace back to early childhood experiences. Neuroscience now confirms what many psychologists have long suspected. Our earliest years shape the way our brains develop. Children who experience neglect, abuse, or emotional disconnection grow up with nervous systems wired for stress. Their ability to regulate emotions is impaired, making them more vulnerable to seeking external sources of relief. Mate explains that addiction is deeply connected to trauma, and trauma does not have to be extreme or dramatic. It is not just about physical abuse or life-threatening events. It can be as subtle as growing up feeling unseen, unheard, or unloved. A child who learns that their emotions are too much for others to handle, or that their needs will not be met, will develop coping mechanisms to survive. Sometimes those coping mechanisms evolve into addiction. Consider a child who cries but is ignored. Over time, they learn that expressing their emotions brings no relief. Their brain adapts, seeking ways to suppress distress. When that child grows up, they may discover that alcohol, drugs, food, or even constant achievement temporarily ease their discomfort. They feel relief, even if only for a moment. But soon, they need more. The cycle begins. And this is why addiction is not simply about pleasure. It is about relief. People do not become addicted because they want to feel good. They become addicted because they cannot handle feeling bad. What if addiction is not the problem itself, but a symptom of unresolved pain, of unmet emotional needs, of deep disconnection from the self? We live in a society that fosters addiction. Modern life is filled with stress, pressure, and disconnection. We are constantly bombarded with messages that tell us we are not enough. We are told to keep pushing, keep achieving, keep consuming, yet we rarely stop to ask why so many people are suffering in silence. Addiction is not limited to substances. It can manifest in socially acceptable ways, like overworking, compulsive shopping, excessive social media use, or even the need for constant validation. How many people do you know who cannot sit still without checking their phones? How many people use food as comfort rather than nourishment? How many people chase success, not because they love what they do, but because they are afraid of feeling unworthy? The reality is that addiction exists on a spectrum. Some forms are more visible and destructive, while others are disguised as ambition, productivity, or self-improvement. But at their core, they all serve the same purpose: to escape discomfort. Dr. Mate challenges us to see addiction not as an enemy to be fought, but as a teacher. It reveals where we are wounded, where we have unmet needs, where we have lost connection with ourselves. Instead of asking, how do I stop this addiction? Perhaps the real question is, what is my pain trying to tell me? And this leads us to a profound truth, one that has the power to reshape everything we thought we knew about addiction. We will uncover this in the next part. If addiction is an attempt to escape pain, then true healing does not come from punishing the addict, but from understanding the suffering that drives the behavior. This changes everything. Instead of asking, how do we make people stop? We should be asking, how do we help people heal? Dr. Gabor Mate argues that the most effective way to address addiction is through compassion, not judgment. He challenges the common approach of criminalization and shame, showing that these only deepen the wounds that fuel addictive behaviors. Instead of seeing addiction as a failure, he invites us to see it as a response to suffering, a desperate attempt to find relief in a world that often does not provide it. Consider this: a person who turns to drugs is not seeking destruction. They are seeking relief. A person who engages in compulsive behaviors is not trying to ruin their life. They are trying to manage unbearable emotions. When we understand this, we can begin to shift our perspective, not just on addiction, but on human nature itself. Studies on childhood trauma reveal a staggering truth. The more adversity a person faces in early life, the higher their risk of addiction. Research from the Adverse Childhood Experiences (ACEN) study found that those with multiple childhood traumas are far more likely to struggle with substance use, mental health issues, and even chronic illness later in life. This is not a coincidence. It is the result of a nervous system shaped by stress, of a brain wired for survival rather than connection. Mate explains that when a child experiences neglect, rejection, or abuse, their brain chemistry is altered. The stress hormone cortisol floods their system, affecting the development of key areas of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, impulse control, and decision-making. Over time, this creates a heightened sensitivity to stress, and a lower threshold for discomfort, conditions that make addiction far more likely. But it is not just severe trauma that leads to addiction. Even seemingly small experiences can shape the way we cope with pain. A child who grows up feeling unseen or unworthy may develop a deep sense of emptiness. They may learn that their needs do not matter, that their emotions are too much for others to handle. When they become adults, they might seek external sources of validation, whether through substances, relationships, or work, to fill that void. And here is where the real challenge lies. Most people who struggle with addiction do not realize that they are carrying emotional wounds. They see their compulsions as personal failures rather than symptoms of deeper pain. Society reinforces this belief, telling them they simply need more willpower, more discipline, more control. But Matei's work reveals a different truth. Addiction is not a failure of the individual. It is a survival mechanism, one that developed as a response to deep and often unacknowledged pain. So how do we break free? How do we begin to heal, not just from addiction but from the underlying wounds that drive it? First, we must shift from self-judgment to self-inquiry. Instead of asking, why can't I stop? We should be asking, what am I running from? Instead of blaming ourselves, we must learn to recognize our pain with compassion. Healing does not begin with discipline. It begins with understanding. One of the most powerful insights from Matei's work is that true healing comes from reconnection with ourselves, with our emotions, and with others. Addiction thrives in isolation. It feeds on disconnection. When we feel unseen, unheard, or unworthy, we turn to external sources to soothe our pain. But when we begin to connect deeply with our inner world, with our past, and with those who truly support us, healing becomes possible. Consider this. The opposite of addiction is not simply sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. This is why traditional approaches to addiction treatment often fail. Programs that rely solely on punishment or abstinence do not address the core issue. They focus on the behavior rather than the cause. But when we create environments of safety, where people can explore their pain without fear of shame, transformation becomes possible. Dr. Matei has worked extensively with some of the most marginalized communities, people struggling with severe addiction, homelessness, and trauma. In his experience, the most effective interventions are not those that impose control, but those that offer understanding. When a person feels truly seen and heard, their need for self-destructive coping mechanisms begins to diminish. This is true not only for those struggling with addiction, but for all of us. How often do we numb ourselves without realizing it? How often do we distract ourselves with work, social media, or entertainment just to avoid uncomfortable feelings? Addiction exists on a spectrum, and in many ways we all experience it in different forms. The key to healing is learning to sit with our emotions rather than running from them. This does not mean drowning in pain. It means creating space for our emotions to be felt, understood, and processed in a healthy way. Matei teaches that healing requires self-compassion. It requires us to look at ourselves not with blame, but with curiosity. What drives our behaviors? What pain have we been carrying? What would happen if instead of suppressing our emotions, we allowed ourselves to truly feel them? And this leads us to a powerful truth, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about overcoming addiction. In the next part, we will explore the deepest and most transformative insight of all, the role of self-awareness and emotional healing in breaking free from addiction's grip. If addiction is rooted in pain, then healing is not about willpower, it is about self-awareness. This is the key insight that changes everything. Without understanding what fuels our compulsions, we remain trapped in the cycle, mistaking the symptom for the cause. But when we turn inward and ask, what is my pain trying to tell me? We open the door to real transformation. Dr. Gabor Mate teaches that self-awareness is the foundation of healing. Without it, we are like ships lost at sea, drifting wherever our unconscious patterns take us. With it, we begin to see the invisible forces shaping our behaviors. We begin to understand why we react the way we do, why we seek escape, why we return to the same habits despite knowing their cost. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, but instead of seeing your physical reflection, you see the emotions, fears, and memories that have shaped your life. What would you notice? What patterns would become clear? Many people go through life unaware of the deep emotional imprints left by their past. They see only the surface, the addiction, the anxiety, the need for control, without recognizing the deeper wounds beneath. Matei argues that addiction is, at its core, a loss of connection with the self. The more disconnected we are from our true emotions, the more we seek external relief. This is why healing begins with awareness. Awareness of our emotions, our triggers, and the stories we have unconsciously carried since childhood. One of the greatest barriers to healing is our fear of feeling. Many people fear that if they allow themselves to truly feel their pain, it will overwhelm them. But Matei reminds us that emotions do not destroy us. What destroys us is our resistance to them. When we suppress our feelings, they manifest in other ways: anxiety, depression, addiction, and even physical illness. But when we allow ourselves to acknowledge our pain, we take the first step toward freedom. Think about the last time you felt emotional discomfort. What did you do? Did you sit with the feeling, allowing it to be processed? Or did you distract yourself by scrolling through your phone, eating, drinking, or working harder? Most of us have been conditioned to avoid our emotions. We have learned to fear sadness, to suppress anger, to numb loneliness. But what if our emotions are not the enemy? What if they are trying to guide us toward healing? Mate suggests that addiction is often the result of emotional suppression. Many people who struggle with addiction were once children who were not allowed to express their pain. They learned that their feelings were too much for the world to handle, so they buried them. But emotions do not disappear. They resurface in other ways, through anxiety, self-doubt, and the constant search for relief. So how do we reconnect with ourselves? How do we begin the process of healing? First, we must cultivate emotional honesty. This means recognizing our true feelings without judgment. It means allowing ourselves to say, I feel sad, I feel afraid, or I feel unworthy, without pushing those feelings away. This can be uncomfortable at first, but it is essential. Healing does not happen in avoidance. It happens in awareness. Second, we must learn to meet our own needs. Many people turn to addiction because they were never taught how to comfort themselves in healthy ways. They reach for substances, relationships, or achievements to fill an inner void. But true healing comes from learning to nurture ourselves, to give ourselves the love, care, and attention we may not have received in the past. Third, we must practice self-compassion. One of the biggest obstacles to healing is shame. People who struggle with addiction often carry deep guilt, believing they are flawed or broken. But Mate emphasizes that addiction is not a personal failing. It is a response to suffering. When we replace self-judgment with self-compassion, we create the space for true transformation. Consider this. If you saw a child crying, would you yell at them to stop? Or would you offer them comfort and understanding? The way we treat ourselves in our moments of struggle determines whether we heal or remain stuck in pain. Self-compassion is not weakness. It is the foundation of change. But self-awareness alone is not enough. Healing also requires connection. We do not heal in isolation. We heal in relationships with others who see us, support us, and remind us of our worth. This is why community is so vital in overcoming addiction. Whether it is through therapy, support groups, or deep friendships, having people who understand our pain can make all the difference. Mate explains that addiction thrives in environments of loneliness and shame. Many people hide their struggles out of fear of judgment. They believe they must battle their demons alone. But the truth is, healing happens when we allow ourselves to be seen. When we share our pain with others, we break the cycle of isolation. We remind ourselves that we are not alone. Think about your own life. Are there people you can turn to when you are struggling? Do you allow yourself to be vulnerable, or do you keep your pain hidden? The path to healing is not about perfection. It is about connection with ourselves, with our emotions, and with those who can support us. And this brings us to the final and most powerful insight of all. What if addiction is not just about escaping pain, but about searching for something deeper? What if, at its core, addiction is a misguided search for meaning, for love, for wholeness? In the final section, we will uncover the ultimate key to healing, the one truth that can transform not just addiction, but our entire understanding of human suffering. If addiction is not just about escaping pain, but about searching for something deeper, then healing is not just about breaking a habit. It is about rediscovering who we truly are. This is the ultimate insight that Dr. Gabor Mate offers us. Addiction is not merely a disease or a disorder. It is a call from within, a signal that something vital is missing in our lives. Think about it. When people describe addiction, they often talk about an emptiness they cannot fill, a longing they cannot satisfy. They chase pleasure but never find lasting joy. They seek relief but never feel truly at peace. Why? Because addiction is not just about the substance or behavior. It is about a hunger for meaning, for love, for wholeness. Mate argues that at the root of all addiction is a deep disconnection from the self. When we are not in touch with who we truly are, when we suppress our emotions and silence our inner voice, we create a void. Addiction steps in to fill that void, offering temporary relief but never true fulfillment. The real question is not why the addiction, but why the pain? And even beyond that, why the disconnection? Consider this. Every human being is born with an innate need for love, connection, and purpose. As children, we look to our caregivers for safety and validation. When those needs are met, we develop a sense of security, a belief that the world is a safe and loving place. But when those needs are not met, when we experience neglect, rejection, or trauma, we internalize a different message. I am not enough. I am not lovable. I must be something other than who I am to be accepted. This belief shapes everything. It affects the way we see ourselves, the way we interact with others, and the way we cope with pain. It is why so many people seek external validation, why they overwork, overconsume, or chase endless distractions. They are trying to fill a void that can only be filled from within. So how do we heal? How do we break free from the cycle of addiction, not just to substances, but to anything that keeps us disconnected from ourselves? First, we must reclaim our sense of self. We must recognize that our worth is not based on what we do, what we achieve, or how others perceive us. It is something intrinsic, something that has always been there, waiting to be rediscovered. Mate teaches that healing begins when we stop running, from our pain, from our past, from ourselves. When we finally turn inward, when we allow ourselves to sit with our emotions instead of numbing them, we begin to reconnect. We begin to see that we are not broken. We are simply carrying wounds that need attention, understanding, and care. Second, we must redefine what fulfillment means. Society teaches us to seek happiness in external things, success, wealth, status. But true fulfillment comes from something much deeper, from connection, from authenticity, from living in alignment with who we truly are. The more we suppress our true selves, the more we seek substitutes. But when we begin to embrace our emotions, our needs, and our unique path in life, the pull of addiction weakens. This is why practices like mindfulness, therapy, and self-reflection are so powerful. They help us see beyond our immediate cravings. They teach us to observe our thoughts and feelings without being controlled by them. They remind us that we are more than our impulses, that beneath the surface, there is a part of us that is whole, resilient, and capable of healing. And finally, we must embrace connection, not just with ourselves, but with others. The greatest misconception about addiction is that it is a personal failing. But the truth is, addiction thrives in isolation. Healing happens in community. When we surround ourselves with people who see us, support us, and remind us of our worth, we begin to rewrite the stories we have carried for so long. Imagine what would happen if, instead of punishing addiction, we sought to understand it. Imagine if, instead of shaming those who struggle, we created spaces where they could heal. This is the shift that Mate calls for, a shift from judgment to compassion, from control to connection, from suppression to understanding. Because in the end, addiction is not the enemy. It is a messenger. It is a sign that something in our lives needs attention, that something within us is asking to be seen, heard, and healed. And that is the most powerful truth of all. Healing is possible. No matter how deep the wounds, no matter how long the struggle, there is always a path forward. The journey may not be easy, but it is worth it. Because at the heart of healing is something we all long for, not just freedom from addiction, but a return to ourselves. So now, I leave you with this question. What are you truly searching for? And what would happen if, instead of looking outward, you began to look within? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If this resonated with you, share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Because the more we understand addiction, the more we can create a world where healing is possible for everyone. Thanks for looking. Imagine this. You walk into a lively gathering, a place where voices overlap in endless chatter, where laughter fills the air, and where people seem to be completely absorbed in their social exchanges. There are smiles, handshakes, and animated conversations. It is a scene that many would describe as the essence of human connection, an event where people strengthen their social bonds and indulge in what they believe to be meaningful relationships. Now shift your focus to a lone figure standing at the periphery. They are not anxious, nor do they appear awkward or lonely. Instead, they seem completely indifferent to the entire spectacle before them. They are lost in thought, their mind occupied with something far more compelling than small talk and pleasantries. While others engage in light-hearted banter, this individual remains detached, uninterested in trivial conversations, uninterested in the energy that seems to captivate the rest of the crowd. Why do intelligent people often seem disengaged from social life? Is it arrogance, introversion, or something much deeper? Could it be that intelligence naturally leads to a preference for solitude? And if so, why? Today we will explore the profound insights of Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brilliant and unconventional philosophers of the 19th century. His perspectives on intelligence and social life challenge everything we have been conditioned to believe. And by the end of this video, you will understand why highly intelligent individuals often find little to no value in social interactions. The final revelation will be the most profound of all, one that may change the way you view your own relationships forever. Schopenhauer argued that intelligence and solitude are deeply intertwined. The more intelligent a person is, the less they feel the need to rely on social interaction for stimulation or validation. This is because their minds are naturally rich with thoughts, ideas, and internal dialogue that make external distractions unnecessary. In his seminal work, The World as Will and Representation, he explains that the average person seeks company because their mind is empty when left alone, whereas highly intelligent individuals possess an internal world so vast that solitude becomes a source of pleasure rather than loneliness. This raises an important question. Is social interaction truly necessary for happiness, or is it simply something we have been taught to believe? From childhood, we are told that making friends, being sociable, and engaging with others are essential to our well-being. We are led to believe that those who prefer solitude are somehow missing out on life. Yet, history tells a different story. Some of the most brilliant minds, Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Emily Dickinson, Franz Kafka, and even Schopenhauer himself, chose to distance themselves from the noise of society. Were they miserable, or did they simply understand something that most people don't? Schopenhauer saw socializing not as an inherent human need, but as a means of escape for those who lack depth. He believed that people who crave constant interaction do so because they cannot bear the silence of their own minds. To him, the majority of conversations are filled with trivialities, gossip, and meaningless exchanges that serve no real intellectual or personal purpose. In contrast, the intelligent person is self-sufficient. They do not seek companionship out of necessity, but rather choose it selectively, when and if it serves a higher purpose. But let's take a moment to reflect. Have you ever found yourself feeling drained after social interactions? Have you ever noticed that while others seem to thrive on socializing, you often feel exhausted, as if your energy is being depleted rather than replenished? If so, you are not alone. Many highly intelligent individuals report feeling detached from traditional social structures, not because they dislike people, but because they see through the illusion of social necessity. Now, some might argue that humans are social creatures by nature, that we evolved to depend on groups for survival and emotional well-being, and this is true, to an extent. But Schopenhauer had a different perspective. He believed that while social structures are useful for practical matters, such as trade, cooperation, and external survival, they do not necessarily lead to internal fulfillment. In fact, he argued that excessive socializing is often a distraction from true personal growth. He compared people to empty vessels. Those with little intellectual depth require external input, conversations, entertainment, social validation, to feel complete. But those with rich inner worlds do not need these distractions. Their thoughts, ideas, and creativity provide them with an endless source of engagement, making solitude not only desirable, but essential for their intellectual and emotional well-being. This idea challenges one of the deepest assumptions of modern society, that being social is an inherent virtue. But is it? Or is it simply a way to avoid the discomfort of being alone with one's own thoughts? Schopenhauer also saw another problem with social life, one that intelligent individuals quickly recognize. In social interactions, there is an inevitable element of conformity. People engage in predictable discussions, follow social norms, and suppress their true selves in order to fit in. Highly intelligent individuals, on the other hand, are often unwilling to do this. They prefer authenticity over acceptance, depth over superficiality, and truth over politeness. This refusal to conform makes them outliers, people who do not fit neatly into the mold of traditional social expectations. This explains why so many brilliant thinkers have been misunderstood, isolated, or even labeled as difficult or antisocial. It is not that they despise society, but rather that they see through its illusions. They recognize that much of what people call connection is often just a series of scripted interactions, driven more by habit than by true meaning. But here's the real question. If intelligent people naturally gravitate towards solitude, does this mean that social life has no value for them? Or is there a way for them to engage with society in a way that is meaningful and fulfilling? This is where Schopenhauer's most powerful insight comes in, one that we will explore in depth as we continue. And the final revelation will be the most transformative of all. Schopenhauer's insights challenge everything we assume about the value of social life. If highly intelligent individuals do not feel the need to be constantly surrounded by others, then what truly drives their detachment? Is it simply a preference? Or is there a deeper reason why social interactions feel unnecessary, even exhausting to them? To answer this, we must explore another key concept in Schopenhauer's philosophy, the distinction between solitude and loneliness. In his view, loneliness is a condition that arises from a lack of fulfillment, while solitude is a state of self-sufficiency. The majority of people fear being alone because they associate it with emotional emptiness, but an intelligent mind does not experience solitude in the same way. In fact, Schopenhauer believed that solitude is not only beneficial, but essential for those who seek wisdom, self-reflection, and personal growth. Let's take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever been surrounded by people yet felt completely disconnected from them? Have you ever engaged in a conversation only to realize that it holds no real meaning? This is precisely the feeling that Schopenhauer described, the awareness that much of social life is built on superficiality rather than true intellectual or emotional connection. In many ways, society conditions us to believe that being alone is unnatural, that isolation is something to be avoided at all costs. But Schopenhauer saw things differently. He argued that solitude allows for the deepest forms of thought and creativity, while constant socialization prevents true introspection. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." This idea is profound. It suggests that the need for social interaction is often a form of dependency, an inability to be alone with one's own thoughts. The intelligent person, however, does not fear solitude. They embrace it because it grants them the freedom to think, to create, and to understand themselves without external influence. Consider some of the greatest minds in history. Many of them lived in deliberate isolation, not because they were incapable of socializing, but because they found deeper fulfillment in solitude. Isaac Newton spent years alone while developing his theories of motion and gravity. Nikola Tesla chose to remain single and dedicated his entire life to his work. Emily Dickinson rarely left her home, yet she produced some of the most profound poetry ever written. These individuals were not lonely. They were immersed in the richness of their own minds. But there is another reason why intelligent people often distance themselves from social life, one that goes beyond mere preference. Schopenhauer observed that most human interactions are driven not by a genuine exchange of ideas, but by social expectations, ego, and even hidden competition. He believed that in social settings, people often seek validation rather than truth, and this can be deeply frustrating for those who value intellectual honesty. Think about this in your own life. How many conversations do you have that feel truly meaningful? How often do you encounter people who are more interested in listening than in speaking? For highly intelligent individuals, these shallow interactions can feel like a waste of time. They see through the masks that people wear, the way individuals adjust their personalities to fit social norms, the way they avoid deep discussions in favor of small talk, the way they seek approval rather than truth. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence naturally leads to a heightened awareness of these social dynamics, and the more a person becomes aware of them, the less they are willing to participate in them. He observed that intelligent individuals often struggle to find people who truly understand them, not because they are arrogant, but because their way of thinking is simply different. They see the world through a lens that most people do not, and as a result, they often feel like outsiders. But this raises a difficult question. If social life is so often filled with superficiality, should highly intelligent people isolate themselves completely? Is there any value in human relationships at all? Schopenhauer had a nuanced answer to this. He did not believe that all social interactions are meaningless, only that most of them are. He suggested that the key is selectivity. Intelligent individuals should not avoid social life entirely, but they should be highly deliberate about who they spend their time with. He advised seeking out relationships based on genuine intellectual and emotional connection rather than social obligation. He also made an important distinction between different types of solitude. There is solitude that leads to growth and reflection, and there is solitude that stems from bitterness or alienation. The former is healthy, while the latter can become destructive. Schopenhauer warned against allowing intellectual superiority to turn into contempt for others. He believed that true wisdom comes from understanding the nature of society while still maintaining a sense of detachment. So how can intelligent individuals navigate this balance? How can they embrace solitude without becoming completely disconnected from the world? The answer lies in the final and most powerful insight from Schopenhauer, one that reveals the ultimate reason why smart people don't care about social life and what they do instead. Schopenhauer's philosophy leads us to a striking realization, one that many intelligent individuals come to on their own, whether consciously or unconsciously. It is not that they outright reject society, nor that they lack the ability to engage in social life. Rather, they recognize a fundamental truth. Most human interactions are not based on substance, but on necessity, habit, and social conditioning. This realization changes everything. If most people engage in social life not because they truly desire deep connections, but because they fear solitude, then what does this say about the nature of human relationships? Schopenhauer believed that much of what people call friendship or companionship is often rooted in mutual need rather than genuine connection. This is a concept that can be difficult to accept because it challenges one of our most deeply ingrained beliefs, that relationships are inherently valuable. But Schopenhauer forces us to ask, are they really? Or do we simply seek them out to avoid confronting ourselves? He argued that most friendships are transactional in nature. People befriend others not necessarily because they deeply connect with them, but because of shared circumstances, work, school, convenience. When these circumstances change, the connection often fades. This is why so many friendships dissolve over time. The bond was never truly about mutual understanding. It was about external factors that no longer exist. Intelligent individuals see this pattern and, as a result, become more selective with their relationships. They do not invest in connections that lack depth or authenticity. This perspective is not cynical, it is liberating. When you stop seeking validation from social life, you become free to build relationships based on genuine alignment rather than social obligation. Schopenhauer himself was highly skeptical of the idea that being well-liked or socially successful was a sign of intelligence or personal fulfillment. He noted that the most profound thinkers in history were often isolated, not because they were rejected by society, but because they chose a different path. Take, for example, Leonardo da Vinci. He was known to be deeply introspective, preferring the solitude of his studies to the distractions of social gatherings. His mind was consumed with ideas, inventions, and an endless pursuit of knowledge. He saw social interaction as a potential diversion from his true purpose. The same was true for Nikola Tesla, who famously said that he never married because he believed relationships would interfere with his work. These individuals were not lonely. They were consumed by something greater than socializing. But what is it that intelligent people seek if not social validation? The answer lies in something Schopenhauer valued above all else: wisdom. He believed that the highest form of existence was one dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and self-mastery. For those who think deeply, Time spent in contemplation is far more valuable than time spent in idle conversation. They are not interested in being popular or socially dominant. They are interested in understanding reality at a deeper level. This is where Schopenhauer's philosophy takes an even more radical turn. He suggested that true wisdom requires a form of detachment, not only from social life, but from the illusions that most people live by. To him, the average person is caught in a cycle of endless distractions, chasing status, approval, entertainment, without ever questioning why. Intelligent individuals, on the other hand, naturally distance themselves from these things because they see them for what they are, temporary and often meaningless. Consider how much of social life revolves around performance. People carefully curate their identities, filtering what they say and how they present themselves to fit into societal norms. There is an unspoken pressure to conform, to be agreeable, to maintain appearances, to avoid uncomfortable truths. But for those who see through this, participation in such a system feels exhausting. Schopenhauer described this as the burden of clarity. The more you understand, the less you are able to tolerate illusions. This does not mean that intelligent people never engage in social life. Rather, they approach it with a different mindset. They are not attached to it, nor do they define themselves by it. They see it as something that can be useful at times, but unnecessary for their deeper fulfillment. This is why so many intellectuals prefer small, meaningful conversations over large gatherings. It is why they gravitate toward people who challenge them intellectually, rather than those who simply provide companionship. But here lies the greatest paradox. While intelligent individuals often withdraw from social life, they are also the ones most capable of understanding human nature at its deepest level. Their solitude is not a rejection of humanity. It is an attempt to understand it from a clearer perspective. Schopenhauer himself believed that wisdom comes from observing life without being fully immersed in it. Only by stepping back can one see the full picture. This idea challenges everything we are taught about the importance of social life. If deep thinking naturally leads to solitude, then perhaps the true measure of intelligence is not social success, but the ability to be alone without feeling incomplete. This is a concept that modern society struggles to accept because it contradicts the belief that social connection is the highest form of fulfillment. But Schopenhauer forces us to ask, is it really? Or have we been conditioned to believe that because solitude is uncomfortable for most people? As we approach the final and most powerful insight from Schopenhauer, we must confront the ultimate question. If intelligent individuals do not care about social life, then what do they value above all else? And how can this realization transform the way we approach our own lives? The final revelation will be the most profound of all. If intelligent individuals do not place great importance on social life, then what do they value above all else? What is it that gives their lives meaning, if not the approval, companionship, or validation of others? Schopenhauer's ultimate insight is both profound and unsettling. The highest form of fulfillment comes not from external sources, but from within. He argued that those who seek happiness through social life are often chasing a fleeting illusion, while those who cultivate inner depth, knowledge, and self-mastery attain something far more enduring. At the core of his philosophy is the idea that human suffering arises from desires, our endless craving for recognition, pleasure, and distraction. Most people, he observed, spend their lives in a state of restless pursuit. They seek relationships, status, and entertainment, believing that these things will bring them happiness. But even when they achieve what they desire, the satisfaction is temporary. Soon, a new craving emerges, and the cycle begins again. Intelligent individuals, however, are more likely to see through this illusion. They recognize that true contentment cannot be found in external validation, but in a life aligned with deeper purpose and understanding. This is why they often withdraw from superficial social interactions. It is not that they despise people, it is that they refuse to engage in distractions that take them away from their true pursuits. This realization is life-changing because it forces us to ask, what if everything we have been taught about fulfillment is wrong? What if happiness does not come from being surrounded by others, but from developing our own minds and souls? Schopenhauer believed that the most intelligent people do not fear solitude because they have learned to be at peace with themselves. Instead of seeking external stimulation, they cultivate inner richness. They read, they reflect, they create. They pursue knowledge not because it makes them socially admired, but because it is an end in itself. He wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." In other words, those who are deeply intelligent and introspective do not see life in simplistic surface-level terms. They question, they analyze, they search for meaning. And because of this, they often feel disconnected from mainstream society, which tends to avoid deep existential questions. But here is where Schopenhauer makes his most powerful argument. Solitude is not merely a preference. It is a requirement for those who seek true wisdom. He warned that being surrounded by the noise of society can prevent an individual from developing independent thought. The expectations of others, the pressures to conform, the constant distractions, all of these things pull people away from the most important journey they can take, the journey inward. For this reason, He saw solitude not as isolation but as a form of liberation. He believed that the greatest minds in history reached their potential, not by immersing themselves in social life, but by stepping away from it. By detaching from the ordinary concerns of society, they were able to see reality more clearly and devote themselves to higher pursuits. This challenges everything modern culture tells us about social life. We are constantly encouraged to network, to build relationships, to avoid being alone. But Schopenhauer forces us to reconsider, is this truly necessary? Or have we simply been conditioned to believe that because society fears solitude? If we look at history, we see that many of the most remarkable thinkers, artists, and inventors lived in a state of partial or complete withdrawal from mainstream life. They were not interested in casual socialization or mindless entertainment. They were consumed by something greater, their ideas, their work, their search for meaning. But does this mean that social life has no value at all? Schopenhauer did not go that far. He acknowledged that human relationships can be meaningful, but only when they are built on genuine intellectual or emotional depth. He warned against surrounding oneself with people simply for the sake of avoiding loneliness. He argued that if one must choose between superficial company and solitude, solitude is always the better option. So, where does this leave us? Should we abandon social life entirely? Not necessarily. But Schopenhauer's insights offer a radical shift in perspective. Instead of seeking fulfillment through others, we must first find it within ourselves. Instead of fearing solitude, we should embrace it as a tool for growth and self-discovery. Instead of chasing social validation, we should pursue knowledge, wisdom, and personal excellence. This is the ultimate realization. Highly intelligent people do not care about social life because they have discovered something far more valuable: the ability to think independently, to create freely, and to exist without the need for constant external validation. They understand that true fulfillment is not found in the presence of others, but in the cultivation of the self. So now the question turns to you. What would your life look like if you embraced solitude as a strength instead of a weakness? If you stopped seeking external validation and focused instead on your own growth, how much more could you achieve? Perhaps the greatest minds in history were not outliers, but pioneers. And perhaps the path they walked, the path of introspection, independence, and intellectual freedom, is the very path that leads to the deepest form of fulfillment. Thanks for looking. Imagine this. What if everything you believed about intelligence, its value, its glory, its promise of a better life, was turned on its head? What if being intelligent, or even striving for genius, was not the gift we've been led to believe, but a burden, a curse, even a source of profound unhappiness? Stay with me, because by the end of this video you might never want to be intelligent again. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most provocative and misunderstood philosophers of all time, held a view so radical it continues to shock thinkers even today. He believed that intelligence, far from being a blessing, carries with it hidden dangers that few understand. These dangers, Schopenhauer argued, can rob us of peace, happiness, and even the ability to truly enjoy life. Today we'll explore his hidden secret about intelligence, what he saw, why it matters, and how it could forever change the way you view your own mind and the world around you. Schopenhauer was a man deeply acquainted with the struggles of life. Born in 1788, his philosophy was profoundly shaped by a world filled with suffering, uncertainty, and disillusionment. While his contemporaries were focused on grand ideals of progress and reason, Schopenhauer chose to look into the shadows of the human condition. He wasn't interested in flattering us with comforting lies about human potential. Instead, he exposed uncomfortable truths, and one of his most striking revelations was about the cost of intelligence. To Schopenhauer, intelligence was not merely the ability to solve problems or accumulate knowledge. It was a double-edged sword, a tool that could elevate us to great heights, but also plunge us into the depths of despair. He believed that the more intelligent a person was, the more acutely they experienced life's suffering. Think about it. Have you ever felt that the more you understood the world, the more alienated or disillusioned you became? That's exactly what Schopenhauer meant. Here's the paradox he revealed. Intelligence heightens our awareness, but it also amplifies our sensitivity to pain and imperfection. The brighter the light of our understanding, the darker the shadows it casts. An intelligent mind, according to Schopenhauer, sees through illusions, the comforting lies we tell ourselves to make life bearable. It sees the futility of chasing endless desires, the transient nature of success, and the inevitability of loss. While this awareness can lead to profound insights, it can also leave us feeling isolated, overwhelmed, and detached. Schopenhauer's insights resonate deeply with the concept of existential dread, a term later popularized by thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard and Jean-Paul Sartre. The more we understand the universe and our place within it, the more we are confronted by its indifference. This is a burden that the highly intelligent bear more intensely than others. Schopenhauer argued that this heightened awareness could even erode our ability to find joy in simple pleasures. A less intelligent person might find contentment in mundane routines or shallow pursuits, but an intelligent individual often sees through these distractions, rendering them hollow and unsatisfying. Does this mean intelligence is inherently bad? Not exactly. Schopenhauer recognized its value, but urged us to see it for what it truly is: a tool, not a solution. He believed that many intelligent people fall into the trap of over-relying on their intellect to navigate life, hoping it will lead them to happiness. But happiness, he argued, is not a product of knowledge or reasoning. It is rooted in something much simpler and paradoxically less cerebral: peace of mind. Consider this. How often have you been consumed by overthinking? How many sleepless nights have you spent replaying scenarios in your mind, analyzing, second-guessing, trying to find answers to unanswerable questions? Schopenhauer would say this is the curse of intelligence, a restless mind that cannot stop searching, even when there is nothing to find. At this point, you might be asking yourself, if intelligence is such a double-edged sword, what can we do about it? Should we suppress our curiosity, turn away from seeking knowledge, or strive to become less aware? Schopenhauer's answer was surprisingly practical. While he didn't suggest abandoning intelligence, he emphasized the importance of managing its effects. He believed that cultivating tranquility, a state of inner calm and detachment, was the antidote to the turmoil caused by an overactive mind. Tranquility, according to Schopenhauer, requires us to accept certain truths about life. First, we must acknowledge that suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience. Instead of resisting it or trying to outthink it, we should learn to coexist with it. Second, we must recognize the limits of our understanding. No matter how intelligent we are, there will always be mysteries we cannot solve and questions we cannot answer. Accepting this can free us from the exhausting pursuit of certainty. Finally, Schopenhauer urged us to seek meaning not in grand achievements or intellectual conquests, but in the simple, fleeting moments of beauty and connection that life offers. A sunset, a piece of music, a quiet conversation with a loved one. These are the treasures that even the most brilliant mind cannot improve upon. But here's the twist. Schopenhauer also believed that the ultimate form of tranquility lies in letting go of the self, the very entity that craves understanding and control. This radical idea draws from Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhism, which influenced his thinking. By transcending the ego, Schopenhauer argued, we could free ourselves from the endless cycle of desire and suffering that intelligence so often magnifies. So, what does this mean for you? How do Schopenhauer's insights about intelligence apply to your life? Let's pause for a moment to reflect. Have you ever felt that your intelligence, or your constant drive to understand and analyze, has made you more unhappy than fulfilled? Have you ever wished you could turn off your thoughts, even just for a moment, and find peace in simply being? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this is a conversation worth having. And remember, we're only just beginning to uncover Schopenhauer's hidden secret about intelligence. What he revealed next might change the way you view not only your mind, but your entire existence. Now let's delve deeper into Schopenhauer's perspective and uncover why he believed intelligence often leads to a profound sense of isolation. To understand this, we must examine a key principle of his philosophy: the will to live. For Schopenhauer, the will to live is the fundamental force driving all existence. It's an insatiable, blind impulse that compels every living being to survive, reproduce, and strive, even in the face of inevitable suffering. This will is irrational, relentless, and most importantly, indifferent to the happiness or well-being of the individual. We are all, in Schopenhauer's words, slaves to the will, caught in an endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. Here's where intelligence comes into play. A less intelligent person might live in harmony with the will, pursuing desires without questioning their deeper meaning or purpose. But for the highly intelligent, the story is very different. Their heightened awareness allows them to see through the illusions of the will, to recognize the futility of chasing one desire after another, only to be left unfulfilled. This clarity, however, comes at a cost. It creates a disconnection between the intelligent individual and the rest of humanity. After all, how can you relate to those who are content with superficial pursuits when you see life's deeper, darker truths? This disconnect can make the intelligent person feel like an outsider, an observer, rather than a participant in the human experience. They are burdened by insights that most people never confront, insights that reveal the absurdity and transience of existence. But here's the paradox. Schopenhauer believed that this same intelligence which isolates and burdens us also holds the key to transcending the will. How? Through the power of art and contemplation. Art, according to Schopenhauer, offers a unique escape from the suffering of the will. When we engage with art, whether it's music, literature, or visual beauty, we enter a state of pure perception. In these moments, we are no longer consumed by desires or the incessant demands of the will. Instead, we experience a rare kind of freedom, where we can simply observe and appreciate life without the weight of striving. Take music, for example, which Schopenhauer considered the highest form of art. He described it as a direct expression of the will, capable of transcending language and intellect. Unlike other art forms that represent aspects of the world, music speaks to something deeper. It resonates with our innermost being, offering a glimpse of solace in an otherwise turbulent existence. This idea might resonate with you. Think about a time when you were moved by a piece of music, a painting, or a powerful story. For those brief moments, the chaos of life seemed to fade away, and you felt connected to something greater, something timeless. Schopenhauer believed that these moments are not just fleeting pleasures, but profound opportunities to step outside the cycle of suffering and glimpse a higher truth. But there's more. Schopenhauer argued that intelligence could also be used to cultivate a state of detachment he called quieting the will. This involves stepping back from the constant striving and desires that dominate our lives, and instead embracing a perspective of acceptance and tranquility. By quieting the will, we free ourselves from the endless cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. This is easier said than done, of course. In a world that glorifies ambition, success, and the relentless pursuit of goals, the idea of stepping back can feel almost sacrilegious. But Schopenhauer's wisdom reminds us that true fulfillment doesn't come from achieving more or knowing more. It comes from letting go of desires, of expectations, and even of the need to constantly make sense of everything. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the pressure to achieve, to keep climbing higher, to always be better? What if the solution isn't to do more, but to do less? What if the key to happiness lies not in adding to your life, but in simplifying it? Think about that for a moment and feel free to share your thoughts below. As we continue, we'll explore Schopenhauer's connection to other great thinkers and how his ideas on intelligence have influenced modern psychology and philosophy. There's a reason his work has endured for centuries. It speaks to the universal struggles of the human condition and offers a path to peace that is as relevant today as it was in his time. And here's the most fascinating part. While Schopenhauer's ideas can feel heavy, even pessimistic, they ultimately point to a profound sense of liberation. By understanding the hidden costs of intelligence and learning to quiet the will, we can achieve a state of clarity and serenity that few ever experience. But how can we apply these lessons in our daily lives? What practical steps can we take to embrace Schopenhauer's wisdom and transform our relationship with intelligence? Stay with me, because what comes next might be the most important revelation of all. Let's now dive into the practical applications of Schopenhauer's wisdom and how his ideas about intelligence and the will can transform your daily life. If you've ever felt trapped by your thoughts or overwhelmed by the weight of your own mind, this is where his teachings can become a source of guidance and empowerment. Schopenhauer believed that the first step toward liberation is awareness. Recognizing the patterns of the will and how they manifest in our lives is crucial. Most of us spend our days chasing desires, wealth, status, recognition, believing that achieving these goals will bring lasting happiness. Yet, as Schopenhauer pointed out, even when we achieve what we want, the satisfaction is fleeting. The mind quickly moves on to the next desire, trapping us in an endless loop. To break free, Schopenhauer suggested a radical shift in perspective. Instead of pursuing external goals, turn inward. Begin to observe your desires without judgment. Ask yourself, why do I want this? What do I hope it will bring me? Often you'll find that the things you chase are rooted in societal expectations or fleeting impulses, not genuine needs. This simple act of introspection can help you detach from the relentless pull of the will. But awareness alone isn't enough. Schopenhauer also emphasized the importance of cultivating mindful detachment. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to life, but rather learning to engage with the world without being consumed by it. One way to practice this is through meditation or quiet reflection. By sitting in stillness and observing your thoughts, you can create a sense of space between yourself and the constant chatter of your mind. Over time, this practice can help you develop a calm, centered perspective, even in the midst of life's challenges. Another practical tool Schopenhauer advocated is the pursuit of intellectual and artistic nourishment. Remember, he believed that art and philosophy have the power to elevate us beyond the suffering of the will. Engaging with great works of literature, music, or philosophy isn't just a form of escapism. It's a way to connect with deeper truths about existence. When you immerse yourself in a powerful symphony or lose yourself in a profound book, you're experiencing a rare moment of transcendence, a chance to step outside the chaos of daily life and touch something eternal. Schopenhauer's insights also have profound implications for how we relate to others. One of the hidden costs of intelligence, as we've discussed, is the feeling of isolation. Highly intelligent individuals often struggle to connect with those around them, feeling misunderstood or out of place. Schopenhauer's answer to this dilemma was simple yet profound: cultivate compassion. He argued that recognizing the shared suffering of all beings is the key to genuine connection. When we see others not as competitors or obstacles, but as fellow travelers on the same difficult journey, our perspective shifts. This doesn't mean suppressing your intelligence or lowering your standards, but rather using your understanding to bridge gaps, foster empathy, and create meaningful relationships. Now, let's talk about one of Schopenhauer's most controversial ideas: renunciation. He believed that the ultimate path to liberation lies in letting go, not just of desires, but of the ego itself. This concept is deeply influenced by Buddhist philosophy, which Schopenhauer admired. The ego, with its constant need for validation, achievement, and control, is the primary source of our suffering. By loosening its grip, we can find a deeper sense of peace, Of course, renunciation doesn't mean abandoning life or withdrawing from the world entirely. It's about approaching life with a sense of detachment and humility. Instead of clinging to what we want or resisting what we fear, we learn to accept things as they are. This acceptance, Schopenhauer argued, is the highest form of wisdom and the key to true freedom. Let me ask you something. How often do you find yourself caught up in worries about the future or regrets about the past? How much of your mental energy is spent trying to control things that are ultimately beyond your control? Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to let go of that struggle, to stop fighting against life, and simply allow yourself to be. That's the kind of peace Schopenhauer is pointing us toward. But here's the most fascinating part. While Schopenhauer's philosophy is often seen as pessimistic, it's actually incredibly empowering. By confronting life's harsh truths and embracing them, we can find a deeper, more authentic kind of happiness, one that isn't dependent on external circumstances or fleeting pleasures. It's a happiness rooted in understanding, acceptance, and the quieting of the will. As we approach the conclusion of this journey, it's time to reflect on the ultimate question. What does it mean to live a truly intelligent life? Schopenhauer's answer might surprise you. True intelligence, he believed, isn't about accumulating knowledge or solving problems. It's about wisdom. It's about understanding the nature of existence, embracing its complexities, and finding peace within them. So as we wrap up this exploration of Schopenhauer's hidden secret about intelligence, I want to leave you with this thought. Intelligence is a gift, yes, but it's also a responsibility. How you choose to use it, whether to chase fleeting goals or to cultivate lasting wisdom, will shape the course of your life. If this resonates with you, take a moment to share your reflections in the comments. What do you think of Schopenhauer's ideas? Have you experienced the burdens or blessings of intelligence in your own life? Let's continue this conversation, because these are the kinds of questions that have the power to change how we see ourselves and the world. And remember, as Schopenhauer himself taught us, sometimes the greatest truths are found not in what we achieve, but in what we learn to let go of. Now let us piece together the wisdom we've uncovered and explore how Schopenhauer's insights can transform our perception of intelligence and, ultimately, our lives. Schopenhauer's philosophy reveals a stark but liberating truth. The pursuit of knowledge and understanding, while noble, does not necessarily lead to happiness. Instead, it opens the door to a deeper awareness of life's inherent struggles. But this awareness, paradoxically, is also a gateway to transcendence. To truly embody Schopenhauer's teachings, we must embrace the following principles. 1. Acceptance of life's duality. Schopenhauer taught that life is a balance of light and shadow, joy and suffering. To live wisely, we must accept this duality rather than resist it. Every moment of joy carries the potential for loss, and every sorrow holds the seed of growth. By accepting this, we can approach life with a sense of balance and equanimity. This acceptance doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. Instead, it means engaging with life fully, but without illusions. When you stop expecting life to be a constant stream of happiness, you free yourself from unnecessary disappointment. You learn to savor the moments of peace and beauty, knowing they are precious precisely because they are fleeting. 2. The art of detachment. Detachment is a recurring theme in Schopenhauer's philosophy. He believed that much of our suffering comes from clinging to desires, relationships, ambitions, and even identities. Detachment doesn't mean abandoning these things, but rather learning to engage with them without letting them define us. Think of it as holding a butterfly in your hand. If you grip it too tightly, you crush it. But if you hold it lightly, you can appreciate its beauty without causing harm. This is the essence of detachment, learning to appreciate life without becoming enslaved by it. 3. The pursuit of higher meaning. For Schopenhauer, art, philosophy, and self-reflection were not just intellectual pursuits. They were essential tools for navigating life's challenges. These activities allow us to step outside the ceaseless demands of the will and connect with something greater than ourselves. When you immerse yourself in a symphony, lose yourself in a great novel, or engage in deep contemplation, you are not escaping life, but enriching it. You are touching the timeless, the universal, the sublime, and in those moments, you transcend the limitations of your individual existence. 4. Compassion as the ultimate connection. One of Schopenhauer's most profound insights was the power of compassion. In recognizing the shared struggles of all beings, we open ourselves to a deeper connection with the world. Compassion allows us to see beyond the boundaries of our own experience and extend kindness and understanding to others. This doesn't just benefit those around us, it transforms us. When we act with compassion, we break free from the isolation that intelligence can sometimes bring. We become part of a larger whole, contributing to a world that is a little less harsh, a little more humane. 5. Quieting the mind and the will. The ultimate goal of Schopenhauer's philosophy is not to escape life, but to find peace within it. This peace comes from quieting the endless desires of the will and cultivating a state of inner calm. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, or simply spending time in nature can help you achieve this. Imagine sitting by a still lake watching the water reflect the sky. In that moment, your mind is quiet, your heart is light, and the world feels whole. That is the kind of peace Schopenhauer believed we could all experience if we learn to quiet the will. As we conclude this journey into Schopenhauer's hidden secret about intelligence, let's revisit the question we began with. Is intelligence a gift or a burden? The answer, as we've seen, is both. Intelligence can isolate us, burden us, and reveal uncomfortable truths about life. But it can also elevate us, liberate us, and connect us to the profound beauty and mystery of existence. The choice is ours. We can let our intelligence become a source of suffering, or we can use it as a tool for growth, compassion, and transcendence. Schopenhauer's teachings remind us that true wisdom lies not in escaping life, but in embracing it fully, with all its contradictions. So as you move forward, take a moment to reflect on what you've learned. How will you use your intelligence, not just to understand the world, but to transform it? How will you quiet the will and cultivate a sense of peace and purpose? And most importantly, how will you connect with others, not despite your intelligence, but because of it? If these ideas resonate with you, let's continue the conversation. Share your thoughts, your questions, and your own experiences with intelligence and self-discovery. Together, we can explore the deeper truths that make life not just bearable, but meaningful. Remember, as Schopenhauer taught us, the greatest insights often come from embracing the paradoxes of existence. Intelligence is not just a burden, it's also a beacon lighting the way to a deeper, more authentic life. Thanks for looking. Have you ever wondered what it takes for a good person, someone kind, compassionate, and ethical, to commit acts of cruelty or even become a monster? Imagine someone you admire, someone you trust, transforming into someone you barely recognize. What if I told you that this isn't just a rare anomaly, but a pattern seen across history and human behavior? Today, we are delving into one of the most provocative and unsettling questions about human nature. Why do good people sometimes do bad things? By the end of this video, you'll uncover the shocking mechanisms that push ordinary individuals into darkness. More importantly, we will uncover how to recognize and resist these forces, with the last insight being the most critical and empowering of them all. This journey takes us deep into the psychological experiments, historical events, and philosophical reflections that expose the thin line separating good from evil. This is not just a story of others. It's a mirror that forces us to look inward and ask, what would I do in their place? Could I too be swayed by these forces? Stay with me, because what you'll discover today could fundamentally change the way you see the world and yourself. The Lucifer effect is a concept popularized by the psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who conducted the infamous Stanford prison experiment. What he revealed was profoundly unsettling. The environment we are placed in, the roles we adopt, and the authority we obey can twist even the most virtuous individuals into perpetrators of harm. Think about it. History is filled with examples of ordinary people who committed extraordinary atrocities. The guards in Nazi concentration camps, the soldiers who carried out ethnic cleansing, or even the bystanders who stood silent as horrors unfolded. All of these individuals were not born evil. They were, in many cases, regular people swept up in circumstances that unleashed the darkest parts of human nature. Why does this happen? The answer lies in a combination of psychological and social forces that shape behavior. First, there is the power of authority. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the 1960s showed that people would go to extreme lengths, even inflicting pain on others when instructed by an authority figure. In his study, participants were asked to deliver electric shocks to another person, who was actually an actor pretending to feel pain. Shockingly, most participants continued administering shocks, even when they believed they were causing severe harm, simply because they were told to do so. Now think about your own life. How often do we follow instructions without questioning them, whether it's from a boss, a leader, or even societal norms? What would you do if someone in a position of power asked you to compromise your morals for the greater good? Another critical factor is the concept of dehumanization. When we strip others of their humanity, labeling them as the enemy, subhuman, or less than, it becomes easier to justify acts of cruelty. This is a tactic used time and again in propaganda, war, and even everyday conflicts. It's easier to harm someone when you no longer see them as a person. Consider the language we use today in social and political discourse. How often do we see groups of people reduced to labels or stereotypes? Reflect on how this diminishes our empathy and connection, creating an us versus them mentality. But dehumanization is only part of the puzzle. Social roles and group dynamics also play a significant role. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment vividly demonstrated this. College students were randomly assigned to be either guards or prisoners in a simulated prison environment. Within days, the guards began to exhibit abusive behavior, and the prisoners showed signs of extreme stress and submission. What was shocking was how quickly the participants lost sight of their individuality and conformed to the roles they were given. This raises a critical question. How much of our identity is shaped by the roles society imposes on us, Are we truly free to act as individuals, or are we subconsciously playing parts dictated by the systems around us? These forces, authority, dehumanization, and group dynamics, are not theoretical. They are active in our daily lives, influencing the way we think, act, and perceive others. We see them in workplaces, schools, social media, and even within families. Recognizing these forces is the first step in resisting them. But what about the tipping point? The exact moment when a good person crosses the line? That moment is often subtle. It begins with small compromises, a decision to stay silent when witnessing injustice, an agreement to follow along just this once. Over time, these small choices accumulate, creating a slippery slope that can lead to profound moral failure. Pause for a moment and think, have you ever made a choice that went against your values because it felt easier or safer? What were the consequences? As we move forward, we'll explore how to recognize these moments before they spiral out of control. More importantly, we'll uncover how to foster resilience against these psychological forces. But first, let's confront an even deeper question. Are some people immune to the Lucifer effect, or is it a danger we all face? Stay tuned, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about yourself and human nature. Let's now confront the question that lingers in the minds of many. Are some people truly immune to the Lucifer effect? The answer, as uncomfortable as it may be, is that none of us are entirely immune. Psychologists have long debated the role of personality in resisting corruption and moral collapse. While certain traits, such as strong empathy, self-awareness, and moral courage, may act as protective factors, the truth is that under the right, or perhaps the wrong circumstances, anyone can fall prey to these forces. Think of it this way. We all carry within us the capacity for both great good and unspeakable harm. This duality is a recurring theme in literature, religion, and philosophy. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, described this as the shadow aspect of our psyche, the darker, often repressed parts of ourselves that we are reluctant to acknowledge. Jung believed that to fully understand ourselves, we must confront this shadow and integrate it into our conscious awareness. Have you ever felt a surge of anger or envy so intense that it surprised even you? Have you ever said or done something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted deeply? These are glimpses of the shadow at work. Left unchecked, this shadow can grow and manifest in ways that align with the Lucifer effect. But here's the hopeful part. Awareness is our greatest defense. By understanding the psychological mechanisms that lead to moral collapse, we gain the power to resist them. So let's delve deeper into how these forces operate in the real world and how we can counteract them. One of the most insidious mechanisms is something psychologists call moral disengagement. This concept, introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura, explains how individuals rationalize harmful behavior to avoid feeling guilt or remorse. For example, someone might convince themselves that everyone else is doing it, or that the ends justify the means. These rationalizations create a psychological distance between the individual and their actions, making it easier to justify wrongdoing. Consider how this plays out in everyday scenarios. A student might cheat on an exam, telling themselves it's just a one-time thing. A manager might treat employees unfairly, believing it's necessary to meet company goals. In these moments, moral disengagement allows people to act in ways that contradict their values. The antidote to this is what some psychologists refer to as moral vigilance. This involves actively questioning our actions and their consequences, even when it's uncomfortable. It means asking ourselves, am I justifying something that deep down I know is wrong? Another powerful tool is the cultivation of empathy. Empathy acts as a counterbalance to dehumanization. When we truly see others as complex, feeling individuals, people with hopes, fears, and dreams, it becomes much harder to harm them. This is why storytelling, art, and genuine human connection are so vital. They remind us of our shared humanity and break down the barriers that divide us. But what about the societal level? How do we address the larger systems and structures that perpetuate harm and enable the Lucifer effect on a grand scale? This is where the role of leadership and collective responsibility becomes crucial. History has shown us that charismatic leaders can either uplift or corrupt entire societies. Adolf Hitler, for example, manipulated fear and prejudice to justify atrocities. On the other hand, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to inspire positive change and resistance against injustice. This brings us to a pivotal question: what kind of leader do we choose to follow, and what kind of influence do we exert on others? Even if we're not in positions of traditional authority, we all have influence, within our families, communities, and workplaces. The question is whether we use that influence to promote compassion and fairness or to perpetuate harm and division. Reflect for a moment on your own life. Who are the people you look up to? What values do they embody? And equally important, what kind of example are you setting for those who look up to you? As we examine these forces, authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and leadership, it's clear that the battle between good and evil is not just external. It's an internal struggle that each of us faces daily. But here's the empowering truth. Just as circumstances can lead people astray, they can also guide us toward extraordinary acts of kindness, courage, and integrity. The same mechanisms that create monsters can also create heroes. So, how do we ensure we stay on the path of good? How do we cultivate the strength to resist the pull of the Lucifer effect when it arises? The answers lie ahead. In the next section, we'll uncover practical strategies for recognizing and resisting the forces that lead to moral failure. These strategies have been tested by psychologists, spiritual leaders, and ordinary individuals who have faced extraordinary challenges. And remember, the final insight we'll explore is the most transformative of all, a realization that could change not only the way you see others, but also how you see yourself. To resist the forces that can lead us astray, we must first understand that awareness alone is not enough. While recognizing the psychological mechanisms of the Lucifer effect is a crucial step, we need actionable strategies to counteract their influence. Let's explore these strategies, beginning with the concept of moral courage. Moral courage is the ability to act ethically and stand up for what is right, even in the face of fear, opposition, or personal loss. It's what drives someone to speak out against injustice, to protect the vulnerable, or to admit a mistake when it would be easier to stay silent. But moral courage is not something we are born with. It's something we cultivate through deliberate practice and reflection. Think of historical figures like Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat on a bus, sparking a civil rights movement. Or consider whistleblowers who expose corruption and wrongdoing, often at great personal cost. These individuals were not immune to fear, but they chose to act despite it. So how can we develop moral courage in our own lives? Start by identifying your core values, the principles that matter most to you. These might include honesty, compassion, fairness, or accountability. Reflect on times when you faced a moral dilemma. Did you act in alignment with these values, or did you compromise them? One practical exercise is to imagine yourself in challenging scenarios. What would you do if you witnessed bullying at work? How would you respond if pressured to follow an unethical directive? By visualizing these situations and rehearsing your response, you strengthen your ability to act decisively when the moment arises. Another essential strategy is to build strong social connections with people who share your values. Surrounding yourself with supportive and principled individuals can act as a buffer against negative influences. These relationships provide a sense of accountability and encouragement, making it easier to resist the pressures of conformity and authority. But what about when we're confronted with systems or environments that seem designed to erode our morals? This is where the concept of situational awareness becomes vital. Situational awareness involves recognizing the subtle cues and dynamics that shape behavior. For example, pay attention to group norms, what is considered acceptable or expected in a given environment. If you notice patterns of exclusion, dishonesty, or harm, question them. Ask yourself, is this truly right, or have I simply accepted it because everyone else has? In addition, consider the role of small actions in creating change. Often, we feel powerless in the face of systemic issues, but even small acts of resistance can make a difference. Think of the ripple effect, how one person's decision to act with integrity can inspire others to do the same. For example, in the workplace, speaking up against unethical practices might seem risky, but it can encourage others to voice their concerns as well. Similarly, choosing kindness and understanding in everyday interactions can challenge the culture of dehumanization that often permeates society. Let's also address the critical importance of self-reflection. The philosopher Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Self-reflection allows us to identify our biases, acknowledge our mistakes, and grow from them. It's not about perfection, but about progress, becoming a little better, a little more aware with each passing day. Make it a habit to regularly ask yourself questions like, what motivated my actions today? Did I treat others with respect and empathy? Were there moments when I stayed silent when I should have spoken up? By reflecting on these questions, you train yourself to act with greater intention and integrity. But what about the ultimate question? Can the Lucifer effect ever be completely neutralized? While the answer may depend on individual and societal factors, the key lies in fostering what psychologist Philip Zimbardo calls a heroic imagination. The heroic imagination is the mindset that allows ordinary people to take extraordinary actions in the face of moral challenges. It's the belief that you too can make a difference, that heroism is not reserved for the exceptional, but is accessible to all of us. To cultivate this mindset, start by looking for opportunities to practice small acts of heroism. These might include standing up for someone being treated unfairly, volunteering to help those in need, or simply choosing kindness over indifference in your daily interactions. It's also helpful to study the lives of those who have exemplified heroism. From historical figures to modern-day changemakers, their stories remind us that courage and compassion are within our reach. At this point, you might be wondering, what is the most powerful insight of all? What final realization can truly transform the way we see ourselves and the world? That answer lies in understanding the profound interconnectedness of humanity. The line between good and evil does not run between groups of people or nations. It runs through every human heart. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn once wrote, the battle line between good and evil, runs through the heart of every man. This realization is both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that we are all capable of both harm and healing, but it also gives us the agency to choose. Every moment presents a new opportunity to act with integrity, to resist the pull of darkness, and to contribute to a world rooted in compassion and justice. Stay with me, because in the final part, we'll dive even deeper into how these ideas can be applied to your own life. Together, we'll uncover practical steps to not only resist the Lucifer effect, but to become a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. At this point, we've uncovered the psychological mechanisms that can turn good people toward darkness: authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and the influence of group dynamics. We've explored how awareness, moral courage, empathy, and self-reflection serve as defenses against these forces. Now let's focus on what you can do, starting today, to become not just resilient, but a source of light in challenging circumstances. The first step is to recognize your influence. No matter how small or insignificant your role may seem, you have the power to shape the environment around you. In every interaction, you contribute to the norms and values that guide others. Are you fostering a culture of kindness, fairness, and accountability, or are you silently allowing harmful behaviors to persist? Consider the story of someone who changed the course of history through seemingly small actions: Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist during the Second World War. While initially motivated by profit, Schindler used his resources to save the lives of over 1,000 Jewish people from the Holocaust. His story is a testament to how a single individual, even amidst one of history's darkest chapters, can make a profound difference. You don't need extraordinary circumstances to follow this example. You can start in your own community, workplace, or even within your family. Speak up when you see injustice. Offer support to someone who feels isolated. Challenge stereotypes and assumptions that divide people. These small acts, when multiplied, have the power to transform not only individual lives but entire communities. Another vital step is to educate yourself and others. Knowledge is one of the most effective tools against manipulation and moral erosion. Study history, psychology, and philosophy to deepen your understanding of how and why people make the choices they do. Share this knowledge with others, not to preach or lecture, but to spark meaningful conversations that inspire reflection and growth. For example, have you ever considered how much the stories we consume influence our thinking? Films, books, and media often shape our perceptions of good and evil, right and wrong. By seeking out narratives that challenge your assumptions and broaden your perspective, you build a more nuanced and compassionate understanding of the world. Let's also talk about resilience in the face of pressure. Standing up for what is right often comes with risks: social rejection, professional consequences, or even personal loss. This is why resilience is so crucial. Resilience doesn't mean being fearless. It means continuing to act in accordance with your values even when fear is present. To build resilience, focus on practices that strengthen your mental and emotional well-being. These might include mindfulness meditation, journaling, or seeking guidance from mentors and trusted friends. Surround yourself with a community of people who uplift and inspire you. Resilience is not something you build alone. It thrives in connection with others. But what happens when we fail? Because inevitably we will. There will be moments when fear or pressure gets the better of us, when we act in ways we later regret. This is where the concept of self-forgiveness becomes essential. Self-forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior, but about acknowledging your mistakes, taking responsibility, and committing to do better. It's about understanding that failure is part of the human experience, and that growth often comes from confronting our shortcomings. Reflect for a moment. Is there a time when you fell short of your own values? How did you respond to that failure? Did you learn from it, or did you let it define you? The ability to forgive yourself and others is one of the most powerful tools for breaking free from the cycles of harm perpetuated by the Lucifer effect. It allows you to move forward with clarity and purpose, rather than being weighed down by guilt or resentment. Finally, let's return to the most profound insight of all, the interconnectedness of humanity. When we recognize that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart, we begin to see others and ourselves with greater compassion. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does allow us to approach the world with empathy and a commitment to healing rather than judgment. Think about the ripple effects of your actions. Every choice you make, no matter how small, sends waves out into the world. Will your actions contribute to division and harm, or will they bring people together and inspire hope? Imagine a world where each of us takes responsibility for our own choices, where we resist the forces that dehumanize and divide, and where we strive to create environments that nurture compassion and integrity. This is not an unattainable ideal. It's a reality we can build, one decision at a time. As we come to the end of this journey, let me leave you with one final challenge. Reflect on what you've learned today, and ask yourself how you can apply it in your own life. How will you recognize and resist the forces that pull you away from your values? How will you contribute to a world where goodness prevails over darkness? The answers to these questions are not easy, but they are worth pursuing. Because in the end, the battle between good and evil is not fought on distant battlefields or in abstract theories. It's fought within each of us, every single day. So the next time you face a moral choice, remember this. You have the power to choose. You have the power to resist. And you have the power to be a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. The question is, will you rise to the challenge? Thanks for looking. Imagine waking up every morning with a lingering sense that you're meant for something more, yet feeling unable to move forward. You might label yourself as lazy, unmotivated, or even a failure. But what if I told you that you're not lazy? You're just lost. Today we're going to unravel the profound truth behind this feeling, exploring why it's not about laziness, but a deeper disconnection from your purpose, direction, and meaning in life. By the end of this journey, you will gain powerful insights to rediscover yourself and reignite your inner spark. The final realization we'll share might completely transform the way you see your life. Let's begin a journey into the depths of the human experience, where philosophy, psychology, and timeless wisdom converge to illuminate a path forward. Together we will uncover truths that inspire, educate, and empower, offering tools for navigating the challenges of life and finding clarity in moments of doubt. When you call yourself lazy, what are you really saying? In the modern world, we are often taught to equate busyness with worth and productivity with value. If we are not constantly achieving something tangible, society tells us we are failing or falling behind. But is this an honest measure of your worth? Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This idea reveals a profound truth. Feelings of being lost often arise when we focus too much on external measures of success and validation, neglecting the internal compass that guides us toward authentic fulfillment. When we feel stuck or stagnant, it's not always because we lack effort or discipline. Often it's because something within us feels misaligned. Our minds and bodies resist action when it lacks meaning or resonance with who we truly are. Think about a time when you felt genuinely inspired by a project, a dream, or even a simple idea. Did you feel lazy then? Likely not, because motivation flows naturally when we are connected to something we deeply care about. What you might experience as laziness could instead be a signal, a message from within, that you are disconnected from your purpose. Abraham Maslow, the renowned psychologist behind the hierarchy of needs, identified self-actualization as the pinnacle of human growth. This is the stage where we reach our fullest potential and find profound meaning in our lives. However, moving toward this state requires recognizing that feelings of being lost or unmotivated are not signs of failure. They are signs of transition, moments when old patterns and beliefs no longer serve you, and new ones have yet to take shape. While uncomfortable, these transitional periods can be some of the most transformative stages of life. Take a moment to ask yourself, what have you been avoiding? What dreams or desires have you pushed aside because they felt too overwhelming, uncertain, or unattainable? Sometimes we label ourselves as lazy because it's easier than facing the fear of failure or the discomfort of stepping into the unknown. Yet those very dreams you've buried might hold the key to rediscovering your purpose and passion. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard compared being lost to wandering in a vast and unfamiliar landscape. At first everything feels disorienting, and it's difficult to know which direction to take. But as you stop to observe and reflect, you begin to notice subtle signs, the lay of the land, the movement of the sun, or the sound of water, that guide you toward a path forward. In much the same way, when we feel lost in life, the answers often lie in the quiet moments we are too afraid to confront. In today's hyper-connected world, silence and stillness can feel almost unnatural. We fill our days with noise, distractions, and endless tasks to avoid sitting with ourselves. But here's the irony. It's in those still moments that clarity begins to emerge. When we quiet the external noise and turn inward, we start to hear the whispers of our inner voice, the one that knows what truly matters to us. What if the reason you feel lost isn't because you failed, but because you're being called to something greater? What if this moment of disconnection is your mind and soul's way of urging you to reassess the life you've been living? This is not a setback. It's an invitation, a chance to align with a deeper, more authentic version of yourself. Throughout history, many of the greatest thinkers and creators have experienced periods of being lost. Leonardo da Vinci, for instance, would spend days or even weeks in apparent inactivity, simply observing, sketching, or contemplating. To the outside world, it might have seemed like he was wasting time. Yet, those quiet periods were when his creative genius was incubating, leading to breakthroughs that would change the world. Now ask yourself, what if you reframed this period of stagnation as a necessary step in your journey rather than a sign of failure? What if this time is meant for you to pause, reflect, and rediscover what truly matters to you? As we continue, we will explore the deeper roots of this disconnection and uncover practical steps to reconnect with your inner purpose. Stay with me, because the most transformative realization, the one that might redefine how you see yourself and your potential, lies ahead. Let's dive deeper into the roots of this disconnection. Why do so many people feel lost today? The answer lies in how we've been conditioned to live. From an early age, we're handed a blueprint for success: study hard, get a stable job, earn money, buy a house, and retire. While these milestones can provide structure, They don't address the deeper question: what makes life meaningful? Consider the words of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who authored Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." Frankl's work is a reminder that without a sense of purpose, even the most privileged lives can feel empty, while a life filled with meaning can sustain us through unimaginable hardship. If you're feeling lost, it might be because the blueprint you were given no longer resonates with you. Perhaps you've achieved some of those societal milestones but still feel unfulfilled, or maybe you've struggled to reach them and internalize the idea that this makes you a failure. In either case, the underlying issue isn't laziness. It's a lack of alignment between your actions and your deeper values. Pause and ask yourself, what are your values? Not the ones you think you should have, but the ones that truly matter to you. Is it creativity, connection, growth, contribution? Many people never take the time to identify their core values, yet these are the foundation of a meaningful life. Without them, it's easy to feel aimless, as though you're wandering through life without a compass. Psychologically, this state of being lost is tied to what researchers call existential frustration. It's a feeling of dissatisfaction that arises when our actions don't align with our need for meaning. This frustration isn't a flaw, it's a signal. It's your inner self telling you that it's time to course correct, to reevaluate your life and priorities. But how do you begin to find your way again? The first step is to embrace where you are right now. This might sound counterintuitive, but fighting against your feelings of being lost only deepens the sense of despair. Instead, acknowledge them. Accept that this is a phase, a natural part of the human experience. Even the most successful people have faced moments of uncertainty and doubt. What separates those who find their way from those who remain stuck is the willingness to confront these feelings with curiosity instead of judgment. Imagine your life as a vast, uncharted ocean. Right now, you may feel adrift, with no land in sight. But just as sailors rely on the stars to navigate, you too have internal tools to guide you: your intuition, your passions, and your values. The challenge is to trust those tools, even when the way forward isn't immediately clear. One powerful practice for reconnecting with your inner self is journaling. Write down your thoughts, fears, and dreams without judgment. Let your subconscious speak freely. Over time, patterns will emerge, clues about what truly matters to you and where your heart wants to go. Another practice is mindfulness. Spend time in stillness, whether through meditation or simply sitting quietly with your thoughts. These moments of introspection can reveal insights that are otherwise drowned out by the noise of daily life. Another important step is to let go of external comparisons. Social media and modern culture constantly bombard us with curated images of other people's successes. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing everyone else has it figured out while you're struggling. But remember, these snapshots are only one part of their story. Everyone, no matter how successful they appear, has faced moments of uncertainty and doubt. As we explore these concepts, consider this. What would happen if you stopped measuring yourself by someone else's standards and instead focused on your own unique journey? What if the very things you see as weaknesses or failures are actually strengths waiting to be nurtured? Let's reflect on the idea of seasons in life. Just as nature moves through cycles of growth, harvest, decay, and renewal, so too do we. If you're feeling lost, it might be because you're in a season of decay or rest, a time when old habits and identities are falling away to make room for something new. This is not a period to rush through or avoid. It's a time to listen, to heal, and to prepare for growth. In ancient Greek philosophy, there's a concept called kairos, which refers to the right or opportune moment for action. Unlike chronological time, kairos is about timing that feels aligned and meaningful. When you're feeling lost, it might not be the right moment for massive leaps forward. Instead, it might be a time to gather insights, nurture your inner world, and wait for the right opportunity to emerge. As we continue, we'll explore specific actions you can take to realign with your purpose and overcome the feelings of being lost. These steps will help you build a roadmap back to yourself and rediscover the motivation and direction you've been seeking. Remember, the most profound realization, the one that could completely shift your perspective, is still to come. Now that we've acknowledged where you are and begun to understand why you feel lost, it's time to explore how you can move forward. This isn't about forcing change or pretending to be something you're not. It's about uncovering the small, meaningful steps that will guide you back to yourself. One of the first and most transformative actions you can take is to reconnect with your passions. Ask yourself, what brings you joy? What activities make you lose track of time? These are often the things that light a fire within you, reminding you of who you are beyond societal expectations. Passion isn't always loud or grand. It can be quiet, like the satisfaction of solving a puzzle, the peace of gardening, or the excitement of learning something new. The key is to start small. Rediscovering passion doesn't require monumental shifts. It's about creating moments of connection to what makes you feel alive. This brings us to the concept of flow, introduced by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Flow is the state of being fully immersed in an activity, where time seems to vanish and you're entirely present. Finding activities that bring you into this state can be a powerful way to combat feelings of being lost. These moments remind you that life is about more than external achievements. It's about the experience of being fully engaged. Another important step is to redefine your goals. When you feel lost, it's easy to fall into a pattern of aimlessness, avoiding long-term thinking because it feels overwhelming. But here's the truth. Goals don't have to be rigid or perfect. They're simply markers to give you a sense of direction. Start by identifying one small meaningful goal, something achievable within the next week or month. Maybe it's reading a book that intrigues you, starting a new hobby, or reaching out to someone who inspires you. These small wins build momentum, showing you that progress is possible even when the path ahead feels unclear. As you begin to set new goals, remember the importance of self-compassion. Too often, we're our own harshest critics, holding ourselves to impossible standards and berating ourselves for every perceived failure. But consider the words of Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. To love ourselves is to understand ourselves. Self-compassion isn't about making excuses. It's about recognizing that you're human, that struggle is a natural part of growth, and that you deserve kindness as much as anyone else. Reflect on this. How would your life change if you treated yourself with the same understanding and encouragement you would offer to a close friend? What if you saw your moments of being lost not as failures, but as opportunities to learn and grow? Another transformative practice is gratitude. When you're feeling lost, it's easy to focus solely on what's missing or wrong in your life. Gratitude shifts your perspective, helping you recognize the beauty and abundance that already exists. Start a daily gratitude practice, even if it's as simple as writing down 3 things you're thankful for each day. Over time, this practice rewires your brain to notice positivity, fostering resilience and a greater sense of connection to life. It's also crucial to seek connection with others. Isolation can amplify feelings of being lost, making it harder to see the bigger picture. Reach out to friends, family, or mentors who uplift and inspire you. Share your thoughts and fears with them. You might be surprised at how many people have faced similar struggles. Sometimes, simply knowing you're not alone can be a powerful source of comfort and motivation. Let's also address the role of fear. Fear is one of the biggest obstacles to rediscovering your purpose. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of change. It can paralyze you, keeping you stuck in the same patterns. But fear is not your enemy. It's a natural response to stepping outside your comfort zone, a sign that you're on the verge of growth. Instead of avoiding fear, lean into it. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen and what's the best that could happen? Often, the rewards of facing fear far outweigh the risks. As we move through this journey, remember the idea of seasons we discussed earlier. If you're feeling lost, you might be in a winter season, one of stillness and introspection. But winter is not the end. It's a time of preparation, a necessary phase before the rebirth of spring. Trust that this season will pass, and when it does, you'll emerge stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your true self. Consider the story of J.K. Rowling, who faced immense challenges before finding success with the Harry Potter series. She was at rock bottom, unemployed, a single mother, struggling to make ends meet, when she began writing the story that would change her life. In her words, "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." Your own journey may not look the same, but the principle remains. Feeling lost is not the end. It's a chance to rebuild, to rediscover, and to realign. As we continue, we'll uncover the final and most powerful realization, one that has the potential to completely transform the way you see yourself and your place in the world. As we approach the heart of this journey, it's time to face the most profound truth about being lost. This realization has the power to shift everything. Being lost is not a curse, it's a gift. It is the very state that allows you to redefine yourself, your priorities, and your future. It may not feel like it in the moment, but being lost is often the precursor to transformation. Consider the metaphor of a forest. When you're deep in the woods, unable to see a clear path forward, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Yet that very forest is alive with possibilities. New paths waiting to be discovered, hidden clearings where the light breaks through, and an ecosystem teeming with growth and life. Being lost in the forest forces you to pause, to look closely at your surroundings, and to reconnect with your instincts. In much the same way, being lost in life is an invitation to rediscover your inner compass. One of the most empowering ways to navigate this experience is to embrace curiosity. When you're lost, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" shift the question to, "What can I learn from this?" Curiosity turns challenges into opportunities, reframing obstacles as stepping stones to growth. Let's revisit the idea of purpose. Many people believe purpose is something grand and elusive, a single life-defining mission. But what if purpose is not a destination but a practice? What if it's something you cultivate through small intentional actions every day? Viktor Frankl emphasized that purpose isn't something we find, it's something we create by how we choose to respond to life. Start by looking at your daily life. What small acts bring you a sense of fulfillment or joy? Perhaps it's helping a friend, learning a new skill, or even taking care of yourself. These moments might seem insignificant, but collectively they form the foundation of a meaningful life. When you focus on these small, purposeful actions, you begin to rebuild your sense of direction, one step at a time. Another transformative idea is to view life as a series of experiments. When you're lost, it's natural to fear making the wrong decision. But what if there are no wrong decisions, only opportunities to learn? Adopting an experimental mindset allows you to try new things without the pressure of perfection. Whether it's exploring a new career path, starting a creative project, or stepping outside your comfort zone in any way, view it as a chance to gather information about what resonates with you. Now, let's address the final and most powerful realization. You are not as lost as you think. The truth is, deep down you already have the answers. They may be buried beneath fear, doubt, or societal expectations, but they are there, waiting for you to uncover them. This realization is both liberating and challenging because it shifts the responsibility back to you. It asks you to trust yourself, to listen to your intuition, and to take action even when the path isn't fully clear. Think about this. Every great journey begins with a single step, often taken in uncertainty. The explorers who mapped uncharted territories, the innovators who created something from nothing, and the everyday people who overcame immense challenges all began their journeys without knowing exactly how they would end. What they shared was a willingness to move forward, to embrace the unknown with courage and curiosity. As you reflect on this journey, consider the words of poet Mary Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? This question is an invitation to take ownership of your story. No one else can live it for you, and no one else's definition of success or happiness can replace your own. Now it's your turn. What steps will you take to rediscover yourself? Will you embrace stillness, allowing clarity to emerge? Will you reconnect with your passions, values, and intuition? Or will you take bold action, trusting that the path will unfold as you walk it? Remember, being lost is not the end. It's the beginning of something new, a chance to redefine your life on your own terms. You are not lazy, unmotivated, or a failure. You are human, navigating the complexities of existence with courage and resilience. Trust that this moment is shaping you in ways you may not yet understand, and that clarity, purpose, and fulfillment are within your reach. This journey is yours to take, and it begins now. Thanks for looking.